During this discussion, we discussed feedback and just the definition of feedback and what that looks like across different studies and situations. So, according to Daniels and Bailey, information must first serve two functions to be considered feedback. It must tell you where you stand relative to some target or goal, and the performer must know what to do to improve. So, I definitely agree with that as like a general definition of feedback. I think the challenge with trying to define feedback is that number one, there's so many different types of feedback. It's important to define them individually depending on the type of feedback given, right? So as a general overall term, a definition, I think that this broadly defines feedback, but when we look at the different types of feedback that one can give in an organization, the question then becomes how can we define that a little bit more specifically? So I know different types of feedback may be constructive feedback, disciplinary feedback, and then like maybe like a positive type of feedback, so like a positive reinforcement. I know when I was writing my dissertation, I was often using constructive feedback and disciplinary feedback interchangeably. And the biggest feedback that my chair gave me was that they're two very different things, and you can give someone constructive feedback and it may not necessarily be disciplinary in nature. And I also was interchanging corrective feedback with constructive feedback. So these are all very different depending on what that target goal is and the behavior expectation, but then also the potential outcome of this, right? So if I'm giving positive feedback, there's really no potential disciplinary action that may come out of positive feedback, because positive feedback is just that. It's positive, it's reinforcing, it's not necessarily instructing the individual on what to improve. And then maybe like constructive feedback is something that the person can improve and should improve, but it's not necessarily connected with like disciplinary action. But then when we take it a step further to disciplinary feedback, that gives the inkling that if this feedback isn't adhered to, this may lead to corrective action in the future or disciplinary action. So I think it's also important to know that even though they all have distinct definitions and characteristics, they all can potentially lead to disciplinary action or further corrective action or whatever that looks like. Another thing that we talked about is just like the effectiveness of feedback. So kind of looking at the EAB, if you look at EAB and just discuss like feedback and what that looks like and reinforcement quality, we look at the quality of a reinforcer based on what's motivating for the individual. So when it comes to feedback, we also have to question like what type of quality is this feedback and how does motivation play a role in this feedback, right? So some individuals are more willing to learn and to grow and to receive feedback than others. So for some individuals, the first tier of, say, corrective feedback may be effective, and you may not have to go up or down the hierarchy of corrective feedback. Whereas with some individuals, you might find yourself moving throughout that hierarchy a little bit quicker because their approach to receiving feedback is a little bit different. So when we discuss feedback and characteristics of feedback, I think it's also important for us to recognize how individuals receive feedback and how individual characteristics contribute to how feedback is implemented. This then makes it a challenge for organizations just because it's impossible for us to consider every individual's perspective when it comes to feedback and how individual characteristics play a role in feedback when it comes to organizational behavior management, right? Because if an organization has 50 or 1,000 or 5,000 or even five, different people within the organization, the feedback styles are going to differ. So it's up to the organization to figure out a way to standardize feedback. Obviously, it should be tailored in a sense to each individual, but specifically like those corrective action steps, what is that going to look like from a system perspective? So that is something that can be generalized across the whole organization and be applied to almost every employee.